Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Adeline Padlina, and I am the Treatment Court Grant Program Coordinator for the CJC. Welcome to our preliminary application webinar. And thank you for folks that have your cameras on. It's really nice to see faces that match the many emails that I have sent. Like, you're all more than just an email, right? Like you're a real person. Hello, Melissa. I saw that wave. I am also more than just an email. I am a person who works at the CJC, and today we are going to go over the preliminary application for the 25-27 grant program for the treatment court grant. So real quick, before we get started, a couple housekeeping things. First and foremost, I full disclosure, have a real hard time watching a chat, watching slides, watching all of you. So if you can all do me a solid, if you have a question, I will stop multiple times for questions. Just go ahead and raise your hand and we'll shout them out. If you put it in the chat, there is a chance that I will miss it. And the whole point of this is to answer your questions. So let's try to avoid that. We'll work together. Secondly, I just want to give out a huge shout out to my colleague Shelby. She will be monitoring the chat. She is also starting the recording. She's doing all the back end stuff. She is our SM Apply wizard. She does all the things. So shout out to Shelby. And yeah, she'll be helping me today. So if we miss anything, by all means, just let me know. And we'll go ahead and get started. So today we are, as discussed, going to talk about the Treatment Court Grant Program, the upcoming grant that's going to be from 2025 to 2027. Today, we're going to talk about eligibility. We're going to talk about timeline. We're going to talk about the solicitation, some details, answer some questions. We're going to go over some resources that we have for all of you, and I'm going to answer, hopefully, all your questions that come up. There are a few things that we won't talk about, though. First and foremost being the final application. This process has two parts, preliminary application and final application. And the final application includes the budget request sheet. It's a little bit, as some of you have reached out to me and pointed out, it is a little new this year. There's a couple things that are different. Same process if you've been through this before. It'll be the same process as last biennium, just a couple little differences. When we open that final application, I promise you, I will come to you with another webinar just like this. I'm going to bring a budget sheet that is filled out. We're going to walk through it step by step. We just don't have time to do that in the hour today. So if you have those burning questions, I promise you, I will answer them. It's just not going to be today. And then, as I'm sure you all know, the first rule of Fight Club. So we won't talk about that either. The other thing I do want to bring up before we get deeper into this is that you've probably noticed this is a different name. So this grant has been around for a while. It used to be the Drug Court Grant. For a while it was the Specialty Court Grant. Now it is the Treatment Court Grant Program. So welcome to that. I will be full disclosure. The whole time I've been at the CJC, it was the Specialty Court Grant. So I will probably use those two terms interchangeably. I'm trying to get better, I promise. But if you hear them, they are one and the same for our purposes today. All right, any questions so far? Okay, let's do it. Let's get into it. Let's talk about eligibility for this grant. So, as discussed, we have a new name. However, many of the requirements are the same as they were during the last biennium. So, to apply for this grant program, you need to be an existing Oregon Treatment Court. You need to use the Specialty Court Management System, aka SCMS, which we all know and love. And you have to have a treatment provider as a member of your court that accepts OHP. So those three are pretty straightforward. You also need to have a member of your county as the applicant. So what that means is this is due to how we do our contracts. We're going to do the contract with the county. And what that means really for you all on the back end is it means that that county person needs to be the owner in SM Apply. So if you're brand new, welcome. SM Apply is our grant management platform. That's going to be how you apply to the grant. It's going to be where you upload all your documents. It's going to be potentially, if you're like me, something that you sort of like scream at because it's not always the most user-friendly, or it's what you email myself about to be like, how do we do this? But when you set it up, when you first set up your application in SM Apply, it's going to ask for an owner, and then it's going to ask for collaborators. And everyone, whether you're an owner or a collaborator, you can upload documents, you can put things in there, you can do everything. The only difference is that the owner is that person who holds all the power, and they get to hit the submit button. So that person, that owner, needs to be the county person, or we won't be able to accept your grant application. So if you need help switching that, if you're like, I don't understand these terms, that's fine. We can do it. We can walk you through how to switch from a collaborator to an owner. We just really want to make sure that that's the county person. Also, there was a little bit of confusion around LIPSIC, so I just want to briefly go over that. So I want to clarify, part of the preliminary application, which I'm sure you've all seen, you do have to submit a letter of support from your local LIPSIC. That needs to come for each grant that you're applying for. So for each court. So many counties that are on this call, you have 3, you have 4, you have 5 courts that you're applying for. Each one needs its own letter of support. But that's really, at least from our end, what you need. You don't need the LIPSIC to be in SM Apply. That's a question I got. I mean, they can be. That's totally up to you how involved or how not involved you want them to be. That's up to you and your county. But for us, what we need is that letter of support. Beyond that, they should be good. And then finally, I kind of touched on this, but I do want to just again be really clear that there's separate applications for each treatment court program, each grant that you're applying for. So we know this is a huge lift for you all. So this is a lot of questions. I hope that you saw when you were looking through, we cut down the number of questions. We asked for fewer words. We really are trying to listen to you. But we also don't want to miss out on what makes each of your treatment courts unique, right? So we still need to do each of those individual applications, and they, during scoring, are going to be batched by court type. So your adult drug courts are going to be compared to your adult drug courts. Your family treatment courts are going to be compared to your other family treatment courts. So with that, we need to see individual information about each of those courts. So we shouldn't see a lot of copying and pasting across applications. So it's really going to be in your best interest to answer those questions really specifically. Now, I saw a couple hands. I feel like maybe they've gone away, but I'm going to pause. Any questions?
Padlina, this is Jessica. Can you hear me?
Okay, we'll keep going.
Oh.
So since I recognize that we have some new faces, maybe some folks who are just coming in. Oh, Jessica, I see you. Please.
Can you hear me? No?
I can hear you, Jessica.
Hang on just a second. I cannot hear you, but I don't know if that's a you thing or... Okay,
sounds like
can you try again?
Somebody
there you
else
go.
Can hear me. Oh, great.
I can hear you. I'm so sorry.
Fantastic. Sorry, real quick question going back to the LIPSIC. So I hear that you need a separate for each court. Do we need a second? So meaning, for instance, in Yamhill County, we're going to have 3 separate applications. Do we then have to get LIPSIC approval for the second phase as well? Or is the first phase the only LIPSIC letter required?
The first phase is the only one that's required from our end. I don't know if each individual LIPSIC, like your county might have different requirements. Definitely check in. They might want to see it at different parts of the process. But for us, we just need that one letter.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm so sorry if anyone else said anything and I didn't hear you. My speaker was turned off because, it's 2025 and we're not with technology yet. All right. So I recognize that I have a lot of folks on here who potentially haven't been through this process before. So I kind of wanted to go back through and just sort of break down the timeline so that you all know what you can expect. And part of that, frankly, is for me as well. For those of you who don't know, I'm still pretty new to this process. I've only been with the CJC for about 1.5 years, and I came in like halfway through the grant process last time. So for some of us, we're all learning together. So There are two, as you can see from the timeline, there's kind of two major application deadlines that you want to pay attention to. So we already released it, right? On February 3rd, the grant solicitation was released. And then you all are, I'm sure, already working hard on filling out the preliminary application. So there's going to be two parts. Preliminary app is going to be due in SM Apply no later than March 20. I want to be very clear that we cannot at any part in this process accept any of the applications late. They have to be in by the deadlines. I just really don't want anyone to miss out on potential funding because of the deadline, right? So make sure that that preliminary application is turned in. And then you all get to take a deep breath for a minute. I, however, do not. This is when at the CJC, we are gearing up and gearing up hard because we are going to take all of your preliminary applications and we're looking through them. We are also working with OJD where we've gone and we've pulled that SCMS data from Q1 to Q7. We're going to be looking at that as well as the SCOPs. And then we are going to take all of that information and put it into a scorecard. And then in late May, we are going to meet with our grant review committee and they are going to look through everything and they're going to evaluate a court's adherence to standards. So they're going to look and say, how are these courts meeting these best practice standards, right? And then we are going to take their feedback that they provide and we're going to put that along with staff feedback in a letter. So when we are done in the end of May, we are going to come back to all of you and we're going to say, hello, court, here's your feedback letter. Here's your scorecard, and we're going to give them both to you. And then we're going to open up that final application. And so that what you all are going to do is you're going to take that feedback, you're going to take that scorecard, you're going to look at your budget, you're going to look at everything that's going on with your individual court and all the things you're doing. And then you're going to put that information into the final application. So there's a couple questions in there, but the most important part of the final application is going to be that budget request sheet that I mentioned at the very beginning, and that we're going to go over again in a second webinar. So those are going to all come together. I see your questions. I promised I'm seeing them. So let me get through this and then we'll get to all of those. So once in July, after we get all these applications, then staff, i.e. yours truly with help of my team, we are going to take all of your information, bring it back to the grant review committee and present it to them. And then we're going to take their review of the analysis over to, in August, at the August commission meeting, we are going to bring this to the 9-person commission, and they are the folks who make the final award decision. So again, for folks who are new and who have no idea about the CJC, I feel like some of our naming of things could use some improvement because while we are an agency, we are the Criminal Justice Commission, we also have a Criminal Justice Commission. It's a 9-person group of people. They are who I'm talking about. They are going to make the final decisions. Then after that, once they have finally decided, then we will turn those into award letters and they will send them to you. So you will know how much money you'll be receiving, how much funding at the end of August. All right, I saw some questions in the chat. So first and foremost, that is a great question. On what time on 3/20 will the applications be due? I'm going to have Shelby as the person who set up the SM Apply profile. I want to say they're due at 5, but I'm going to give her a chance to correct me. In the meantime, how is the grant committee selected? And does the committee represent all applicant jurisdictions, rural, urban, etc.? Great question, Jennifer. So yes. In answer to your question. So the grant review committee is selected by the CJC. We go through and we made a point. We look for a couple things, right? Because we want representation not only from the applicant jurisdictions, like what Jennifer mentioned. We want a frontier county on there. We want rural counties. We want urban counties. But we also want to hear from different areas within the courts themselves, right? So we made a point to have someone who knows about treatment is on that panel. There are folks who work with corrections. There are a couple of folks that have lived experience. We want different elements so that we are getting the best information that we can when we're looking over what you've applied with over the application. So there are folks from all the jurisdictions that you mentioned. We have someone new from Multnomah County. We have someone from over in a couple folks actually from Eastern Oregon. They're kind of all over the place. And if this is helpful, what I can do is at the end of this, I will send out an email that has the link to this recording of this webinar. I can, in that email, also send a list of the people who are members of our GRC, as well as where they're from, just if you all are curious. All right.
Adeline, I'm happy to provide that closing time if you're ready. So
I am ready.
SM Apply will close on March 20th at 11:59 p.m.
Oh, excellent. So you have until almost midnight. Perfect. Thank you, Shelby.
Of course.
Any other questions about the timeline, about the GRC? How Shelby got to be so awesome? All right, then let's keep going. So I wanted to talk a little bit about after that super stressful part. You're going to know what money, what funding your court is getting at the end of August, but then when are you going to get the stuff, right? So in September is when contracts will start being sent out. They're going to be sent out via DocuSign. You'll sign them, send them back, and then funds will go out from there. I also wanted to point out something that's going to be a little bit different from the last biennium is there's a different project period this time. So for the 25 to 27 grants for this biennium, the project period is going to be from July 1st to 2025 to August 30th of 2027. So if you're paying attention and you're comparing that to 23-25, it is a little bit shorter. It's a total of 26 months. But then there's kind of this gap because when you'll get your contract, you'll see that the contract terminates on November 30th of 2027. So while we're all enjoying our Thanksgiving dinner, the contracts are going to be terminating. So sometimes folks get a little bit confused about what that gap is in there. And that is just for us, the CJC, to be able to tie everything up. So your last date to spend money, you're going to spend funds in that project period, that July 1st to August 30th. But then after August 30th, no more funds are being spent. We are done spending money, at least from this grant. And then we'll work on our end, tie everything up, get everything done, and then the contracts terminate at the end of November. Any questions about that? All right, we're going to keep rolling. All right, I feel like this is the biggest question and potentially why you're all here, is to talk about the 5% cap that you probably saw in the solicitation. So yes is the answer. We are capping all requests at 5% of your original award. But great news, that includes the supplemental funds that were awarded during Q3. So one of the questions I've gotten is like, well, how do we find this? Great question. And I have it spelled out for you. So in your expense sheets that you get from us every quarter, if you go and you look at them, they're going to have multiple tabs. And the first one is Q4 to Q10. That's where you're telling us what money you've spent, etc., moving money around. And then the next tab is going to say budget modification. So if you go all the way, just go to the budget modification tab, scroll all the way up, and in the top right-hand corner, you're going to see a little box that looks like this, and it's going to have your total original award, your new additional funding, and then a couple other things down here. What you want to do is you want to add that total original award plus that new additional funding. And that will almost tell you, that's our starting point, how much you were awarded. But then once you have that number, after adding those two, you're going to scroll all the way down. And on the bottom of this sheet, under all of the totals, there's going to be a line that says available but unrequested funds. So what happened is when we got this one-time sort of I want to say accidental, supplemental funding because of the HB 4002. We got this one-time funding. And some folks were like, hey, I don't think we're going to be able to spend it all. So they left some on the table. And so if your court did that, what was left should be subtracted from that total. So that would be this number. So for many courts, it will be 0. For some courts, it was just a couple bucks. It kind of, the range is there, but you're going to want to add the 2 from the top box. That's your total original award plus your new additional funding, and then subtract those available but unrequested funds. And that is going to give you your total awarded funds. Any questions about that? Okay, if questions come up, because I'm sure many of you aren't looking at the funds, please by all means email me. That's totally fine. We can walk through it. We can do a Teams chat. We can find it for you. Okay, a couple other things that I want to talk about. So because of that supplemental funds that you got in Q3 was part of House Bill 4002. And those additional funds. And the other thing, or something else that came out of HB 4002, was that funding went, instead of funneling through the CJC and to OJD for OJD personnel, now OJD has funds directly for your coordinators. So the only reason I bring this up is because you should be requesting funds for OJD personnel through OJD. We shouldn't be getting any requests for the CJC grant for OJD personnel. Now, there is going to be some funding available for potentially for training and travel through OJD that we do through CJC, and also potentially for supplies, but those amounts are going to be pretty small. The big one, that big chunk of OJD funding for personnel, go through them. And again, we'll get into this a little more in depth when I do the second webinar that we go over the budget sheet. But for now, the key takeaway, you don't want any personnel requests for OJD personnel to come to the CJC grant. Similarly, we are, as you all saw, if you were here during the last biennium, we had to make close to $10 million worth of cuts. And so a lot of these rules that seem new, the caps, all these things are really to help us hopefully not have to do that, because it was just such a huge amount of money. And one of the things that we've kind of come to as well, that as much as we appreciate all the work that alumni groups do, and as much as they are really just a great resource for those in the courts, we do have to limit our funds to those who are actively involved in the treatment courts and those who are actively going through these programs. So at this time, unfortunately, we are not going to be able to fund any alumni requests. Similarly, similarly to alumni, but similar to previous biennia, funds for the RISE conference will most likely be capped. I did put the most likely in there just because it isn't official. If we get all our requests come in and they come in substantially under the amount of money that we have, and it's magical and we don't have to make any cuts, then potentially that wouldn't be the case. But in all likelihood, we will have to cap it. We won't know the rate that we cap it until all the requests are in, but we are expecting it to be similar to caps that we've done in the past. So just for folks who are new, who don't know what that looks like, last biennia, it was capped at $12,000 or 4 people. So, and that's for the whole biennium. So for both years, but usually 2 conferences. So again, I'm sorry there isn't a little more guidance around that exact cap, but just keep that in mind as you're starting to think about those requests. And then finally, just a reminder that we will be looking at underspending. So underspending is going to be considered. We'll be looking at that Q1 to Q7 data. Now, I don't want folks to panic. There are going to be a few folks probably on this call who have been like, hey, Adeline, I told you, like, we got this award, so we had additional funds, or we had this federal grant and we have additional funds, so we haven't spent down yet in the same amount. Definitely, if you have a situation like that and you haven't done so yet, please let us know. But otherwise, we're in Q7, right? So you still have time, definitely be spending that money. Just to give you guys a sense, as of right now, about 1/5 of this the 23 to 25 bienniums grantees, about a fifth of them have spent less than 30% of their funds. So underspending is real, it happens, and we don't want folks to miss out on funds because of the underspending. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to go through this one too, and then I'll pause for questions again. These are just some helpful hints that I think could be really helpful. Again, when you get to that point, make sure you're asking for what you need. These excessive asks could negatively affect your request, much like we said before, we're looking at scorecards, we are looking at underspending, all these things. So make sure that you're keeping your ask within that 5% cap as well. I just want to be very clear and transparent that if you do choose to ignore the 5% cap, we will adjust your request accordingly. So we will be holding to that. And so we'd much rather try and put the money where you want it versus us doing it, right? And then also, I just want to point out admin costs. I know that for other grants and other parts of the state and federal grants, that administrative cap has been increased for some to 15%. The CJC will not be doing that this time. So that cap for the administrative costs are going to be capped at 10% of your total budget. So again, like my hope for all of this, for the webinar and also any interactions we have going forward, we want to be as transparent as possible with you all. So if as you're going through it, you come up with questions, please, again, never hesitate to reach out and ask me, but we want you guys to do as well as you can and want to get this money out to you, and because you're doing important work and we want to support that. Finally, I do want to just speak for a moment to our new courts who are maybe thinking about applying for this grant. And I just want to, again, in the effort of transparency, we want to be clear that if you are a new court who has not applied for this treatment court grant program before, and you're coming in and this is your first time, you will still have the same expectations as the existing courts. So there's not going to be a separate category for new courts. And the reason why I point this out is if, depending on where you are, if you're new, it could result in that weaker scorecard and potentially less funding. So we just want to have all our cards on the table. We are, for the record, still planning on doing an implementation grant. It will open during the summer, so in August of 25. However, again, listening to you all and trying to do our best with the feedback we're receiving, the plan would be to release the solicitation earlier this biennium so that you could see it in the spring. So again, it wouldn't change the start date of that grant, of the implementation grant, but you would be able to see kind of what's expected. And I think one thing that's been a concern for courts who are kind of deciding between them, in that spring solicitation, we would have whatever the cap is going to be. So in the past, for the implementation grants, there has been a cap on how much funding a court can apply for. Last biennium, it was $150,000. We would be doing a cap again. Again, we don't know our budget fully yet, so we can't tell you now, but we can tell you in spring. So that'll be there. And just, I want to put that out there as a potential option for new courts, especially if you're on here listening and trying to think about what's going to be best for you all as you're looking for funding. I just feel like I dropped a lot of information. So do we have any questions so far? The start date, Melissa, for the implementation grant would be in August of 2025. Or that's when the process would start. Yeah, sorry, thank you. Thank you, Rachel, for helping me clarify this. So the solicitation would open in August, funds would come in January of 2026. You're so welcome. All right, we're gonna keep going, but if any questions come up, you let me know. The last thing that I have for you is this appendix. So we're not going to go in deep into it, but there are a couple of things that I want you to know. So all of these links go to the corresponding documents that are all on the CJC website. So if you go to CJC website, you go to treatment courts, you can find all these, or handy dandy, they'll be right here in your slideshow. I do want to draw special attention to our grant administration guide because we're getting a new one. That's super exciting for us. So the plan is that it will be released in March. If it comes out before that, you'll get an email and I will let you know. In all honesty, the things that are going to change in it, I think there won't be a ton that affect treatment courts, at least especially when it comes to like unallowables. So those are mostly going to affect some of our other grants, but what you're allowed to spend your money on is going to be pretty much the same. A couple date changes, that kind of thing, but nothing too wild, I think, for the treatment courts. But regardless, you'll get a new one and it'll be updated on our website come March. And when we get a new one again, I will send it out to you all. And then I did see, Debbie, thank you. Will there be a follow-up email summary of this meeting? Even better, there will be a recording of this meeting that you all can find. In case you didn't know, CJC has a YouTube page where you can come watch us talk over and over and over again if you want to. So you can go through. I will be sending out the link for that with like a brief, I guess, summary per se. I'll also send out the slides with it too. So hopefully you have all the information, but if you go through it and you have a nagging question, again, I'm very, very easy to get a hold of. All right. And then finally, I'm not going to go through these in depth, but I do want to point out that they are here for our folks who struggle with SM Apply or are new and haven't applied for this grant with us. We have logged in here or through here how to start your SM Apply profile. So I do want to point out these are not for the specialty core grant. You could apply for the organized retail theft grant program, but you want to be applying for the 25 to 27 treatment court grant program. But ignore the name. This will walk you through how to do everything else. So again, kudos to my colleague Shelby. She made these and they, again, will walk you through step by step how to log in, how to apply. It's going to show you what you need to go through, what you need to upload, how to add collaborators, all kinds of good stuff. So again, this is just a resource for you. Like I said, I won't make you sit here and go through it. But it is a really, really helpful resource, especially if you're new. In all honesty, I personally don't think SM Apply is the most user-friendly. So I thought it was really helpful. So again, kudos to Shelby for coming up with all of this. And there's quite a few that I'll go through. So with that, the last thing I want to tell you all is my contact info. So I think most of you I've already been in contact with. It's actually really fun to see your little profiles. It's like, oh, that's the email. But you can reach me. Email is always best. It's right there on the top. But if you have something that you're like, man, I just really need to talk through, you can always give me a call too. Just know I cannot express to you how many telemarketers call me and offer me a warranty on my car. I get calls about Netflix for someone named Julia. I get Amazon package offers. I get all kinds of stuff on there. So frequently what I will do is let it go to voicemail and then find out, is this someone who actually wants to talk to me? Or is this someone who's, I don't know, trying to get information from me? So all that to say, please, if you call me and I don't answer, please leave a voicemail. Or like I said, email me and be, hey, ask me for a call and I'm happy to call you back, that kind of thing. Also, Teams is a great option because especially as we get into spreadsheets and that kind of stuff, it can be a lot easier to share that way as well. So all of those are options. I will let you all know in case you're interested. I will be gone from the 18th, so coming next week to the 26th. I will have access to email, but it will be limited. So it might take me a little bit longer to get back to y'all, but I will do my best. So we want to make this process as hopefully as clear as we can for you and as helpful as we can. So that is all I have. I'm going to open up the floor to all of you if you have any questions. Oh, great question, Karen. Is the implementation grant for courts that already exist? It can be. So it needs to be a new court that is just starting, or it can be a court that hasn't received funding from the CJC through this grant program for the past year. That is also an option. And do we need to resubmit documents if they were already submitted? If you, I want to make sure, Susie, I understand your question. If you're asking, hey, we submitted a letter of support from our presiding judge last time, do we need to do it for the 25 to 27 biennium? Yes, all of those forms do need to be updated. This comes up with like MOUs and stuff pretty frequently. So yes, hopefully that's answering your question. If you need more, feel free, turn on the mic. Oh, we got it. Perfect. Right. Well, I am going to just hang out for a couple minutes, but I know how exciting it is when a meeting ends early and no one knows that it's on your calendar and you have free time. So by all means, if you don't have anything else for me, I'll stick around, but you don't have to. Enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you're staying warm wherever you are because it's freezing in the valley right now. And yeah, if you have any questions, by all means, give me a shout and we'll figure it out. Thanks all for being here.